Patrick, the first question I have for you is a question that I'm bringing up with everyone.
All right.
So that question is, what is your definition of smart manufacturing? And how would you describe a smart manufacturing mindset, having a smart manufacturing mindset?
That's a good question. And I think my perspective maybe is a little bit different than some of your other guests. I come from a lean manufacturing background, right? And lean kind of took precedent back in the 90s. At least that's when I started doing it. And so to me, lean and smart are synonymous. The difference really is that one deals from a data perspective much more so than just process observation. And it ensures that you actually have the ability to have supporting data to be able to do what you want. And that's not just machine data. We talk a lot about having machine data, right? And that's a big part of what this renaissance is to moving into smart manufacturing. But in truth, there's a lot of supporting business data that needs to be married with the machine data to really make good use of it. And at the same time, you have to have the ability to contextualize that data to really get the maximal value out of it. So when we talk about what does it mean to have a smart manufacturing mindset, I think it's about smashing through the paradigm of saying, let's just react to the loudest voice in the room and do what they think is the right thing. It's about taking the time and the effort to go out and get the data, synthesize the data, look at it, and make decisions solely based on what the data tells you. And as long as you're willing to do that, you can call it whatever you want, whether it's smart manufacturing, lean manufacturing, what have you, but you will organizationally make the best decisions for the business as a result of having done that. Part of the beauty of where we're at today is that there's a lot more tools and systems in place to be able to do the smart manufacturing, much more so than when I first started in an organization so long ago. There's a lot better tool sets to be able to accomplish that. So, I would encourage any of your listeners out there, when you think about it, don't get too hung up on what is smart and how does it work and how do I plan it. Just realize that what we're talking about is running the business optimally, using data to be able to make informed decisions.
Do most organizations have the ability to go out there and get that data today and do what the data tells them? I'm thinking about this from the perspective of small, large manufacturers, because I understand what you're saying. It could be easy for an executive to say, hey, this is what I think we need to do, but I want to know what's the actionable best practice to make sure they don't go down that path, but go the path of the data instead.
Yeah, that's really important. And when you think about how do you start any journey, you always start from the most informed decision that you can possibly do, right? So a singular voice in the wilderness isn't really going to ever get you where you need to be, right? So the first thing is to have an agreement across the organization that we're going to do everything based on having that data. But to your specific question, do people actually have the data to be able to do that? And the answer to that, at least here in the United States, quite often is no. We haven't taken the time to retool and put things in place from a manufacturing perspective to be able to have the data that's necessary to really drive excellence. And so what you'll see here at the show today, and you'll hear about probably in perpetuity, is the fact that there are people out there doing very innovative things to be able to bring about tools, methods, software, to be able to bring data to places that couldn't exist before. In my background, I worked in a high hazard environment. And so one of the challenges that I had there was, if I wanted to put a sensor on a machine, I had to run conduit, and I had to pour seal-offs and do all these things to get a single sensor. I might spend thousands of dollars to be able to get a single sensor installed on a single machine. But in today's world, we can put wireless sensors on things and stand them up literally in minutes to be able to accomplish that. And so I think while we are playing from a disadvantaged position in many cases because the lack of investment historically in the United States, we're seeing a renaissance where everything, because of reshoring and some other pressures that are being put on the supply chains, we're seeing a significant investment that's bringing back the ability to bring manufacturing back and do it in a way that's smart. What I tell people is, if you take a look at a lot of the equipment that's been built, particularly overseas in the markets that have really blossomed over the last few years of manufacturing, those were the folks that installed that equipment last. And you know what comes with that is you've got it all the sensors are on those machines. They have the ability to be smart right from day one. Here in the US, we're going to play catch up, but I believe we're going to do it the right way, which is everything that we build, we're going to start to put sensors on things as they come in the door. We're going to start to put sensors in place where they didn't exist before, and we're going to start looking at new sensors that didn't exist to blanket everything. And so I think that's where we're going to see some evolution.
So you talked about your journey a little bit in that question. I do want to ask you about that before we get into some additional best practices. What made you decide to leave a Fortune 150 company after 34 years to start a consulting company?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. And I think in the past it would have been one that was very uncommon. But truth be told, there was a lot of folks that decided to leave, right? The Great Resignation. And my story, I'm sure, is not unique in any way, but I had almost 34 years of engineering experience at a Fortune 50 company, and I really enjoyed what I did. I did a lot of lean manufacturing, root cause analysis. I spent a lot of time in traditional engineering, supply chain, and quality systems. Very diverse background. You make a nice income once you work in a business for so long, right? Mm-hmm. But when I first started on the lean journey, particularly in the 1990s, I really came to love the spirit of innovation and being able to transform and re-engineer things. And that was fantastic. But over time, things change. Management changes, focus changes. And I saw where the organization was going in a slightly different direction. And that ability to be an innovator started to lose a little bit of its luster. And I thought, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, never had a chance to capitalize on it. So I thought, when COVID came in, they offered a buyout to a lot of folks. And they said, we've got to pare back. The company was extremely fiscally conservative. They did all the right things to help preserve capital. And they offered buyouts. And I was, I think, the youngest person to take a buyout from the company. And I said, you know what, if I'm ever going to do anything, Chris, this is going to be the time I'm going to try my hand in the entrepreneurial endeavor and see what happens. So I started my own company, I did consulting. And in the course of doing that, I ended up doing some work for a company with a group of guys who were building a division. They built it, they sold it off. We enjoyed working together. And they said, we sold this off and we could go work again for another, company, but what if we did this ourselves? And if we did it ourselves, would you be willing to come join us? And so that's how Axiom was born. So a group of really bright people that I have the utmost respect for. I joined them and we're just having a blast out there doing something that the market really, really needs. We are all dyed-in-the-wool manufacturing guys, controls engineers and so on, and so we love what we're doing.
Well, since you are out there in the field, I do want to get some insights from you around what it takes to transform digitally as well. My first question is, what are the key elements required to successfully manage a digital journey?
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I hope your folks pay really close attention to this. And it's maybe backs into the question from a different perspective than maybe what you'll hear from a lot of other folks. The single most important thing that you need to have to be able to be successful is you've got to have sponsorship at the corporate level, the C-suite level. Somebody has to believe that this is the direction the company needs to go. As you know, smart manufacturing is very much strategic. So we have to be able to have a good core strategy to do that. And in order to do that, you have to have support at the top. Someone has to clear the roadblocks out for the folks underneath. The very next step below that then, Chris, is you have to find an evangelist within the organization. Someone or some group of people that you can empower to say, I understand that maybe this isn't what you do today, but we're going to upskill you to learn how to do these things. And me as a C-suite guy, I'm going to empower you to be able to go do that work and allow that to happen. Once you have those two pieces of the organizational component, I've got the education, the motivation, and the support. Now what we have to do is we have to be able to put pieces in place to set the core strategy. And this is where some folks go wrong. They don't take the time to either look internally or to study or to find someone else who actually knows what to do, engage them, bring them in, develop that core strategy so that you know that you're not going to have false starts and you're not going to have missteps along the way and frustrate the organization. Once you lock in on a strategy, you'll be able to get there successfully. And that's part of what Axiom does. We help people with all the experience that we have to be able to help set that core strategy to know that you're doing the right things right from the start.
So I heard three big things. You got to have sponsorship at the corporate level.
Yep.
You need to have an evangelist,
Yep.
and you need to have a core strategy.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of this, what are the biggest hurdles or impediments to executing on this journey?
Part of it maybe ties back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, is that if you're a company that's willing to listen to the loudest voice in the room, and oftentimes that's somebody who's a little bit more seasoned and maybe has some traditional experience and success in a non-smart world, that can become an impediment. So you have to make sure that you get some equivalency in the voices that are in the room and a commitment to the cause. And once you've got that, that's going to be a great start to how you start to do that. And after that, then, it's really about, as I said earlier, Let's focus on that core strategy to the mission, and let's do it in bite-sized manageable pieces so that you focus on where is the highest elements of return early on in the process.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And I'm going to give you an example of a real world example from myself. I started down the lean journey in the 1990s, you heard that, and I had to follow the lead of a sensei, right? And we did a series of workshops, right? And I said, okay, I trust that you know where to go. And he did a value stream map and he walked through it. And we started doing workshops, and we got about maybe 8 or 10 workshops into it. And I said, well, you know, I don't know if this is working the way we intended or not. But one day, one of the production guys comes up to me and said, Pat, you got to tell me what is going on. Like, business has just completely fallen off the cliff. I don't understand what's going on. He's like, what's happening here? And he said that because his direct response was, there isn't a bunch of whips sitting everywhere. People aren't running around chaotically, right? Mm-hmm. I said, well, let me find out what's going on. So I went and talked to my friends over on the supply chain. They said, well, Pat, I don't know. We haven't really looked that closely. I mean, we know what the numbers are. And they charted it out, and sure enough, we were up 15%, but they felt a 75% reduction in the amount of work effort to be able to do it. That's the same type of transformational effect that you're looking for when you start to deploy these things. Let's do the high-hitting things, let people see it and feel it, because then, instead of having a single evangelist, you've now got a whole group of people that say, oh my God, this stuff really works.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a cool way to do it.
So I guess the last question I've got in this case is, like, what are some of the new tools that are available that enable digital transformation, particularly ones that might not have been available a few years ago?
Yeah, and I tell you, this show is a great example of what is available out there. And so just a quick walk around, you start to see things that are absolutely fascinating from an engineer's perspective. So you take a look at things in no particular order. There are wireless sensors out there that you can attach in minutes and start to get data. A lot of those sensors can be edge compliant devices that have intelligence, such that they'll look at things like vibration, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And they will tell you after the model's built when something is starting to go out. One of the best real world examples of that is my guys, where I used to work, they would have HVAC up on all the roofs, right? Like everywhere you go, you got rooftop. They would never go up there in the winters in Cleveland, where I'm from, and go take a look at how they're performing. But my production guys would know, hey, we don't have ventilation in the room, and that's a problem from a safety standpoint. I could put a sensor up on one of those things, look at the vibration, and find out that a belt came off, that a bearing went bad, or what have you, without having people climbing 4 or 5 stories up on the roof to go take a look at that with icy conditions, right? So sensors have evolved considerably. The other part that I alluded to was the AI piece. So they're doing analytics at the edge with a lot of these devices. Again, fascinating. You're not having to send tons of data up to the cloud to be able to do things, right? So you're able to get that analysis, bring it down, and start to provide information. I sat in a meeting the other day with the CESMII organization, and they went from a computer like yours that was sitting there to sensors on the table, no software installed, nothing connected, and literally within 15 seconds, they had a sensor that was showing digital information on that computer screen that could show you when something was going wrong. Could have never seen that in my lifetime. Never happened, right? So that's another piece of what's going on. Cloud computing, right? So a lot of folks, when I was a young engineer, thinking about taking operational information, putting it up in the cloud, never do it, right? Oh, it's not secure, we can't do this, can't do that. All those walls are coming down. And they're coming down because there's always been this friction between IT and OT, right? Mm-hmm. And OT has very specific demands that are very different than the IT world. No disrespect to our friends in IT, right?
Sure, yeah.
But what's happened is, in order to work around that interchange between those groups, now we can go directly to the cloud, and they've got as good a security model built into that cloud instance as you will ever see on any IT network. And so I think that's a big evolution in terms of how we start to become a much more cohesive organization between the IT and the OT space to be able to do that. And then last, I'm going to leave you with, I think the digital imaging world is utterly fascinating right now. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to evaluate things just like humans do, with what we see, what we hear, what we touch, tactile feel. And so you'll see companies out there that are using AI and digital imaging together to do absolutely fantastic things about how to sense things. So there's a couple companies that we work with in particular, like Kenda, it's used for continuous improvement. They'll break it down into bite-sized bits and you can make improvements on the process. Fascinating. Right across the way, you've got ThinkIQ. Those guys have a fantastic product. They've got a unified namespace to be able to organize all the data, which is imperative to being able to really have a smart manufacturing mindset. And then Leela is another one that does some really cool stuff as well. So these are guys that we work with, and I think we're going to see that continue to evolve over time. The systems are very lightweight, very easy to stand up, and what I'm hoping to see as we start to migrate down this path is the lean mindset starts to come into the tool development. Our goal at Axiom is to be able to bring systems online in hours into days, not weeks into months, so that companies can go out there and get value and take every source of friction out of the way. And I think you're going to see a lot of other folks start to do the same thing.
So, edge compliant devices, sensors, AI, cloud, digital imaging coupled with AI, and then finally the hope that the lean mindset starts to enter this tool development world.
Yeah.
Quite the overview today. Any final, if you had one piece of advice for the audience before we leave, what would that be on how to successfully transform or a key pitfall to avoid?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an example. When I worked at a large company and I had to do a large project, I could walk into a room and I would have 20 of my peers sitting around the table. I'd have people from IT, OT, cybersecurity, process engineering, project engineering, coders, everything, right? And they would all be best in class. These people were fantastic. And that's how we got projects done. When you start to take a look at the fact that 94% of the manufacturing operations are small to mid, they don't have 20, they don't have 10, they don't even have 2. Oftentimes you're going into a room with an owner and a supervisor or manager that's saying, I need help, I'm drowning over here, but I don't take that first step because I don't know what to do, right? And so oftentimes they'll just continue to rely on their systems that become more and more outdated every day, because if you're standing still, you're falling behind. And so my big hope is that your listeners out there that maybe fit into that mold say, you know what, maybe I don't have to know everything. Maybe I'll go find that guy that knows how to do that. Obviously Axiom's not the only one, but that's what we do. We help to come in from the very beginning, set the stage for how do you set that core strategy, how do you align to folks so that you don't have those false starts, you don't miss those gates, and you certainly don't continue to fall behind the competition. Don't wait. Jump in, now is the time. Things are going to start to grow. There's a lot of things happening in the world. We're going to see some ups and downs, but I've been around long enough to know about the whipsaw effect. Every time things go down a little bit, there's this huge drive up at the backside of that, and that can be just as crushing as the downturn. So to all your listeners out there, be ready. It's going to happen, I promise you. Things are going to get crazy out there in the manufacturing space with business, and let's be prepared to do that together.
Love that final closer. Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your insights. A lot of great bite-sized chunks for the audience to take away today. Appreciate you jumping on the show.
Great, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.